Can y'all hear me okay? Awesome. That's what this is for. My name is Brandy Flynn. This event is being put on by the Middle Georgia State College Honors Student Association. Currently, Kristen and I are co-presidenting because I graduate this December. So we're passing the reign on to a brand new awesome honors president. But the Honors Student Association basically is for the students that are taking honors courses. If you have a GPA, I think it's 3.5 or above, you get an email from the school inviting you to the honors program. Just a little bit about our program: if you take 4 honors courses in 4 different areas of concentration, you get your associate's degree with honors designation. If you take 8 or more honors courses in 4 separate areas, you also can get a bachelor's degree as an honor graduate. So that is what the Honors Student Association is, but we like to hold events that are open to the campus. I tell everybody my goal as the president is to make the honors program a little less intimidating, because I'm a non-traditional student. When I got that email, my first thought was, oh my goodness, honors. Joining the honors program is absolutely the best thing that's ever happened to me being a student here. So my goal is just to kind of make it a little less intimidating. So hopefully if all of you are already not in the honors program, you will consider joining if you're invited. Now, the reason that we're here today is Mr. Christopher Ledford was born in Georgia, currently lives in Macon, so he's very local to us. He has written 2 books in a series from the Scroll of Alana. He is a self-made, self-published author. And basically what we're here today for is he's going to talk about his journey from his dream of becoming an author all the way up to writing his own series. So Mr. Christopher Ledford is going to take over from here, and then at the end of this presentation, he's going to be outside doing autographed copies of his book. So if we can all welcome Mr. Christopher Ledford.
Good morning, everyone. I'll be honest, go ahead and get something out of the way. This is my first time before a complete audience of strangers. Hopefully we're not strangers after this, though. So please give me a little courtesy if I seem to be a little nervous or whatever, or stutter. I would appreciate it. I'm going to be speaking in 4 sections. I was asked to speak a little bit about my background so you can get to know me a little bit. Maybe you and I have a lot in common that you may not be aware of. What I did to start writing my first book and how I got it out there. And there's going to be a section after I'm done talking about how I wrote my book, some do's and don'ts, because there's an awful lot of don'ts out there. There's a lot of people that want to take advantage of people that just aren't in the know. So we can get started. My journey started at a very, very young age. My mom tells me that I actually was writing as a little kid so long ago I don't even remember. Probably the funniest thing, she said that I wrote a story about a young little boy that liked to stick a pumpkin on his head every Halloween. Well, that little story went something like essentially, of course, obviously the little kid, he set his mind on doing exactly what he was told not to. So one Halloween, of course, as an adult, when you think back about a story, you don't think about all the little details. I got a little kid in a story that is obviously an expert enough with knives and tools to carve a jack-o'-lantern out of a pumpkin. He sticks it on his head, and of course, it gets stuck on his head. But apparently, as a kid, not only did I have a fantasy brain to think of something like that, but it was a little bit of a horror story as well, because not only was it stuck on his head literally became the jack-o'-lantern. And in the end, the child did unfortunately pass away as the pumpkin rotted on his head. So apparently I've been writing for a very long time, and as you see, I still do it the old-fashioned way. I have stacks and stacks of composition notebooks I carry with me that if I have any thoughts in my car, like on my lunch break or something like that, I do not hesitate to just break out the composition book and start writing my thoughts down. I think it's a good thing to do, especially if you're a writer. One thing, I've read a lot of blogs, and one author referred to it as memory dumping. Because if you're ever in the thought process, I've been laying in bed at night, trying to fall asleep, and then all of a sudden the greatest scene comes to my mind. Well, I usually have to get out of bed and write it down right then. Because what's going to happen, you're going to forget it. So that's one thing I recommend, taking your time, carry your scratch pad with you, notepad, composition book, anything that you want. Write down it, write down your thoughts the moment you can, the first moment that you can. That way you don't forget anything. Some of the struggles, I had a large group of friends, and part of what helped develop my creativity is something that, also the creativity side, apparently I was born with it, because where I came up with those ideas, I have no idea. Maybe it's because my parents let me watch horror movies as a kid, regardless of the restricted rating on them or whatever. So that might have helped. But somewhere down the line, to help expand my creativity or my knowledge base, is I grew up pretty much a geek. I was in a lot of different cliques. I was a skateboarder. A lot of people don't believe that about me when I say it. I was a BMX bicyclist. Not professionally, but I did it as after school or whatever. It's just a fun thing I did. But first and foremost, probably I was a geek. When it came to role-playing games, you name it, I probably played it. Anything from Dungeons & Dragons, Top Secret, Marvel Superheroes, DC Heroes, White Wolf games, yeah. So, seeing how other worlds were developed, I guess, helped expand my vision of a world that I would like to create. Because any of those worlds that I played in, the games are pretty much just for the rule set of playing the game. My group of friends and I, we always sat down to create our own world from scratch. We never used the NPCs, the non-player characters, the characters supplied by the game mechanics themselves. We always did what we wanted to do. Well, somewhere down the road, after about 20 years of role-playing games, I had enough information in my own world, which is called Alana, something that I don't think has been publicly said, is to an audience, or I don't think it's been said on Facebook or anything like that I'll share with you. Where the name comes from is that Alana is the goddess in the mythology of the world. That's the historian. So her scroll magically opens to any scene in time that she wants to remember. So that's where it comes from. So all the books or moments, from the Scroll of Alana, pulled from the history of the realm. I created enough material and characters and put it all together, maps, you name it, timelines, maps, characters, specific magic items and stuff in the game, the mythology, the gods. So a lot of my friends really liked it. They liked it so much that temporarily when I moved away, because I took a promotion at a job that I had at the time, they played in the world when I wasn't even in the gaming group anymore. That did my heart good. They continued on playing in the world that I created. That just gave me so much, that did my heart really good, So what I did is I took the time to polish it, put it together as a source material, and then I started contacting different companies. White Wolf, that's real popular. TSR, now owned by Wizards of the Coast, that was the producer of the Dungeons & Dragons game. And my struggle is the first one, rejections. That's where all this is getting to. I suffered through so many rejections, I couldn't even begin to count them all. And I cannot even begin to tell you all the names of the companies that I approached. Basically, the bottom line of all the fine print, if you cut through the generic, stereotypical emails, responses that I got, it's they have their own R&D, they have their own research and development staff, so they do not take outside submissions. Hindsight's always 20/20. Now I understand why. Probably the primary reason is lawsuits, because if they look at your stuff and they decline it, 10 years later, if you see something they make that's similar to it, they can say, hey, they stole my idea. So, sadly, I'm here to tell you, just be warned. I definitely am not telling you don't try to submit stuff, but plan to have a lot of rejections along the way, because that's just the nature of the beast. So with all the rejections came a lot of lack of self-motivation, time, that promotion I mentioned. I was working a minimum of 50 hours a week. 50 hours plus, so not 40, 45, easily 50 plus hours a week. So that made me really tired, my personal life diminished, and of course, my brain didn't have the energy to come up with any ideas during that time frame either. So of course I developed stress. The lack of support that I had was that when it came around again, one of my best friends that I have that I've never actually met in person, his name is Linton Broad. He actually is a friend of mine from across the pond, as I refer to it. He lives in Australia. He is the brilliant artist that, if you haven't had the privilege of seeing it, it will be at one of the slides at the end. He spent 130 hours creating a full-color image for one of my main characters for me that graces the cover of the book. So he supported me even though he's somebody I never even met in person. I just met him in an online game somewhere, and we've been chatting online ever since. His role was very important for me to get where I am today because over the years, in about a 10-year span, I had lost all motivation, all confidence. Somehow it came from a conversation. I was a writer. He wanted me to send him a piece of my work. So I did. His claim is that he took it to one of his professors at his university because he's taking writing classes. And according to him, he liked it and even his professor liked it. Of course, I was like, there is no way. There's no way a professor likes my work. And it's like I just threw it together. What I sent him wasn't even edited. But he helped build up my confidence. And one day I just started writing again. And the first work is the Scroll of Alana, the Beowulf. So where am I now with it? I am currently writing the third book in the series. Whenever I get writer's block, I do that memory dumping thing. If I have ideas for any other story, I just start making notes. Currently I have an entire book laid out for a fantasy western. And I do mean fantasy western, so there's going to be some magic, some stuff like that in there. And I have about half the layout for a superhero book. So while I'm doing that, I'm on the third book. I'm about halfway through the third book for the Scroll of Alana series. 2 books are currently out there. I have the Beowulf, which is on Amazon, as well as the Swordsman, which is the second book in the series. And I'll talk a little bit more about the book specifically later on. Right now I'm going to go through basically my personal writing process. Hopefully, I know most of you are taking writing classes here, so obviously your professors have shown you ways to do writing. I'm going to show you what I did, what helped me out. The first thing I do is I'll create what you see here is an Excel spreadsheet for the Beowulf. I'll just make a spreadsheet. Down the left-hand side, I start listing all the character names that I can think of. I create names for the characters. And you see it going across. I said because of my strong role-playing background, I guess, I wanted to have an idea in my head as to what character class the characters are. So for the folks here that aren't role players, Namadea, she is the high priestess of the Dark Elves in my story. She's a cleric, so she has healing powers. As you go down, Paleolia, she is very mischievous, I guess. I'm at a blank, I guess, to describe her personality. But a lot of people that have read the book really like that particular character. Because I don't think snobbish is the word, but she's definitely open about the abilities that she possesses. So she's like the rogue, for example. Khalida is a mage, so she's a spellcaster. And as you see across the top of the headings, like what armor they wear, a physical description of their clothing, for example. If it's not medieval time setting, it's whatever clothing, character traits, what weapons they use, their combat style, like how they fight in combat. And what you can't see going across, I do have like their height, weight, eye color, hair color, character quirks. What that allows me to do is that if I describe a character in one particular chapter, or the first time they're introduced in the story, 5 chapters later, I don't turn a character's eyes that were once blue-brown or their black hair white. It helps me keep my character descriptions very consistent. And I think that's probably one of the most important things. Simply because if somebody's reading the book, they're going to be flipping back saying, wait a minute, I don't think that's how they were described. This particular outline that you see here is not for the delve, because you'll notice like it's kind of, that's actually for my Western. In a panic, I could not find the outline I did for the delve, so I just pulled an outline that I had done just so I could show you an example. So you don't see the classic school teaching Roman numerals and things like that, but it is an outline. What I do after I get the majority of my characters together is I do an outline. The main bullet points represents the chapters that I do, and then the small ones, like the letters here in this case, represents a little bit of the events that happened in that particular chapter. With me, I guess back in high school during creative writing class, which I really loved, because my English class, we did a lot of creative writing. We could just choose your own topics and write about it. 3,000 words was typically about the average. So to me now, there's really no standards as far as the length of a chapter that I've come across in any author's blog or writing, website or anything like that. So what I use though is my chapters are about 3,000 words long each. So each one I envision as an episode of a TV series. What that means is that each one has like basically a beginning, middle, and end. So each chapter is actually its own little story. And yeah, I've had a couple friends say that my story doesn't flow very well. I'll be honest about that. I think anybody should be open about the critiques that they hear. It wasn't my intent. I personally think it flows from the standpoint that all the chapters are a consistent story. The chapter is its own thing, and then you move on. I don't leave out any fluff, or excuse me, I do leave out fluff. And that's one of the issues that I think that some people have is, I guess my transitions might be a little better. But if all the adventurers, like in a TV show, if they all decide on Pretty Little Liars to all go to the mall, well, one scene they're in their house and then they're at the mall. You don't see a scene where you see every little traffic light, every little traffic jam. You don't see them going down the road, road rage the person next to them. Unless that scene is significant to the story, in my opinion, it doesn't belong. So while yes, this is writing, it's a different medium than TV shows and movies and stuff like that. That's my take on my writing. That there's not much fluff. I just kind of get to the point. After I do the main outline, you do see here, for example, where I have an actual chapter. So once I do all the bullet points for the book as a whole, I bullet point the chapter. Again, I said, and I wish I could remember the author's name so I could at least give a little shout out, the memory dumping. So what I do, because I used to sit down and just stare at a blank sheet of paper, where's the first word going to come from? Like, what's the first line? So what I do is any thoughts, I just start writing down. And I just number them, 1 to 100, or however many it gets to. And then, after I feel like I have enough bulk, so if my chapter length at my personal target is about 3,000 words, my memory dump, once I hit about 1,500 to 2,000 words, I figure I go back, I make all those bullet points full sentences and let them make sense. And that's where I get my full chapters from. When you're writing your full chapter, I don't limit myself to 3,000 words. I don't get to that, and say, okay, I'm going to stop now. Just keep writing. Never limit yourself. If it flows, let it flow. And of course, what I do is I might break it down. I've had chapters that get so long, when I start writing it, I break it down and become 2 or 3 chapters. So, one good thing is never limit yourself. If you just start writing, just keep on writing. So, in my process, I've come with a lot of do's and don'ts. And so, once the book is done, this is the stage that you'd be at once your book is done. Hopefully, I'll save you probably about 6 months of solid research and Googling and all this kind of stuff. I think there's like 5 or 6 of these that I thought was really good to point out here. The first do, always write a story about something that you know. I know fantasy, so that's what I chose. I know action. I love action movies. You know, I don't particularly, in my opinion, I don't care for romance or anything like that. Don't necessarily care for drama. My personal take on it is life sometimes is a little rough as it is. So I personally I'm just not a person for those tearjerker movies personally. So there's no offense against anybody that is. That's just not me. So that's not what I write about. The reason you want to do that is, one, so you don't get writer's block. Two, as the do not write a story just because the topic is recent or it's exploding. Like right now, vampires. There's about 50,000 vampire trains over the past couple of years that I couldn't begin to make a list of all of them. The other thing, like I said, is like romance, teen romance. You have the Twilight, which is huge. If you don't know about it, again, like I said, if you sit down in front of that page, whether you get the first line or not, or if you try to make bullet lists, like I was saying, you're going to find it's probably going to take you forever to write that story. Maybe somewhere down the line, you know, to branch out, cross-merchandise your writing ability and so forth, and grow as a writer, you might want to do that. But for your first book, stick with what you know, no matter how ridiculous it might be. Whether it's like superheroes, fantasy, sword and sorcery, or whatever it might be. And if it's romance, have at it, comedy, whatever. This is something I already touched on. This is probably the number one thing that I struggled with, again, like searching and scouring the internet for. How long should a book be? There is no defining length for a book. You want to make your book as long as it needs to be to tell your story. My book, the first book, The Delve, weighs in at about 71,000 words. And a lot of people look at pages. My friends are saying, but how long is it? How many pages is it? Pages may be a concern if you end up having the opportunity for a publisher contract or something like that, where the cost of printing comes into play. But words is more likely the measure you want to stick with. Simply because the size of the font, the formatting of the page, like your margins and stuff like that. There's a lot of factors that can actually adjust what your page count is. There's one version of the first book of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Between the first printing over in England and the printing here in the United States and the mass market edition, I think it actually grows by like 100 pages. But the word count didn't change. So keep in mind, I recommend using word count, as a length measurement instead of pages. Don't make it longer than necessary. Again, to my understanding, if you are lucky enough to get a publisher contract, a publisher might request that you add another 10,000 words to the story, because in their mind, they might want it a certain length, to appeal to who they think your audience is going to be. But for you personally, I think just to get it out there, don't worry about fluff. To throw some other numbers out there, just so you have a reference, because a lot of you may not know like word count offhand, but like I said, my Delve is 71,000 pages, 71,000 words. That'd be a very huge book. Stephen King, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Stephen King, if not everybody. His very first book ever, Carrie, was only 60,000 words, made into a movie several times. There's The Mist several years ago. That was a book that was 51,000 words. You notice we're getting lower. An epic poem, Beowulf, 30,000 words. And while it took it a couple hundred years to get there, it was made into a movie. And there's no author to give credit to either. As we get lower, back to Stephen King, 11,000 words, Children of the Corn. That was made into a movie. And it gets worse than that, even less than 10,000 words. Several of his movies, Lawnmower Man, and the movie Johnny Depp, Secret Window. So never let the length of one of your stories determine the success of it. If you can tell your story in 10,000 words, then let it go. Now, when you go to publish it like Stephen King, you might want to combine that in a collection to make it, I guess, more substantial for the buyer. But don't purposely add fluff. If you've told your story, let it go. Let it be what it is. do use a trusted friend or a family member to help you edit your book. This is important because usually if you stare at your own screen, I print it out. I think it's easier to edit stuff when it's on paper than staring at the computer screen. But use somebody you can trust. And when I say trust, I mean not to steal your ideas. Because you can copyright the representation of ideas. You can't necessarily copyright the idea itself. But if you are the first person that came up with it, you'd probably want to be the first person that would want to copyright it, just in case. It's important, like I said, because when you stare at your own work, sometimes you don't see your own mistakes. It becomes difficult because the words glaze over and so forth. Do not let grammar stand in your way, however. I will not reveal the books just because I don't want to sound like I'm bad-mouthing any particular book, if I'm being recorded and pictures taken and so forth. But one of my friends, after they read The Delve, they said, well, it's better than this book, and I almost said it. So my thinking was, well, this particular story, some people either love it or they hate it. There didn't seem very much in between. So I didn't understand what he meant by that. It's like, well, it's better than that particular story. Because he was saying, yes, it's better than such and such. He was like, yeah, it's better than such and such. What he was referring to, though, was the grammar. So at least me being an amateur, my first book out there, it's nice to know that there are professional writers that have been out there that have made movies out of their books and so forth. So they can make all that money and be that popular, that famous, and so forth. When you're picked up by a publisher, if you get the opportunity for a contract, that's what the publishing house has teams of editors for, to edit your book. So I do recommend getting somebody to help you edit it, but don't let the end result stand in your way. One writer's blog said that he put off publishing his book for 6 months. He said, I think it was like, it took him 3 months to write it. So it was done in 3 months. He put it off for another 6 months because he felt he needed to edit it. Well, he felt after wasting another 6 months on it, so double the time it took to write it, he felt that it might have been only 5% better. So that's the issue. I'm a big fan. I think you can fix something until it's broken. So sometimes there's a point, edit it to a point and then just let it go. And just start your next adventure in writing. You do want to use a free service. Amazon is awesome. There are various websites through Amazon. They have one called CreateSpace. CreateSpace is owned by Amazon. That's where you would want to go through to get your book published. And at the very end, when your book is published, it even converts it to an ebook for you. So it's very easy to do. Once you actually get it all done, you want to have some type of piece of software. You want to have it in PDF form. PDF form is the best way. It locks in your formatting and all that kind of good stuff. Amazon does offer some paid services that you can definitely take advantage of if you have the funds. But otherwise, it is possible to do it literally 100% free. Because that's what I did. Do not use a publisher that requires you to pay up front. You'll have ads, pop-ups. I'm sure you've seen them. We're on Facebook, the ticker tape of ads down the side. Hey, we can publish your ebook on Amazon for $80. No. Amazon lets you do it for completely free. So there's no reason to pay anybody. If a publisher is really interested in your work, know that a publisher will talk to you about a contract. They will pay you. So there is no reason, unless you're paying very specifically, like I said, if you can afford it for editing services or something like that, make sure you don't get scammed into paying $20,000 for 5,000 copies of your book up front, from a publisher who's going to take your money, ship your books, and now you got a closet or a living room full of books and nothing to do with them. You do want to actually use a legal service. LegalZoom.com And I know at some point I'm going to sound like a spokesman here. I have no relation to these companies directly. It's just what I've used is the reason I mentioned them today. LegalZoom is really awesome. You can copyright anything through them, artwork, music, you name it. Literary work costs, I think it was like $150 is what I pay. So it's very easy to do. They have online chat and a 24/7 contact telephone number if you need them. And I don't know too many companies when you go to their website that give you their telephone number anymore. They don't want to talk to their customers. LegalZoom is always there if you got questions. Do not, though, allow a publisher to copyright it for you. Again, I've put a lot of years and a lot of hard work into the world and the characters that I've developed. I'm not going to give that over to somebody else to copyright for me. And again, they're out there. Hey, send us your book where we help you get published, copyrighted, etc. Potentially, again, I guess a little bit I think of the bad in people is they might steal my work. So you just want to do it yourself. It's only $150 to get it copyrighted. Always measure your success by the positive and not the negative. So, for example, if one of my friends tell me your book's too short, it's not long enough, I don't take that as a negative. I take it as, oh, so you liked my book so much, you wanted it to be longer. That's how I look at that. That you're going to have people, one of my favorite things is the actor, director, writer, Kevin Smith. I saw a stand-up routine of him one time, and he said one of the best things that I could possibly think of. In his early days, when he wanted to be a director and make a film, his first film, Clerks, a lot of his friends were, why do you want to do that? Why would you want to direct? Why would you want to write? Why would you want to film? Over the years, he fell into like a depression, he said, basically, of some sort. And I might be like overstepping. I don't know if it was like depression necessarily, but he was kind of turned off by the fact that he was surrounded by people that weren't supporting him. They're asking, why would he want to do something? So he had to change his attitude, and he had to start surrounding himself with people that ask, why not? Hey, I want to write a book. Okay, why not? What can I do to help you? You're my friend, what can I do? You need help brainstorming, bounce ideas off of me? So make sure you try to surround yourself with people that want to support you and help you out. Right now, a little bit about the book itself. Otherwise, my long, hopefully not too boring speech is done. My book itself, the first one, from the Scroll of Alana, The Delve. Like I said, it is a medieval fantasy, sword and sorcery. The subgenre would be action-based. Like I said, so it's not a romance, it's not a comedy. If it were turned into a movie, I'd say it's probably PG-13. Some of the violence, I think, might be a little too descriptive for some people. I don't know. But I like to think I try to stop. I don't go too gory or anything like that, so don't think it's gory. It's not a horror story. But it's a lot of action. I think it's, in my mind, might be a little biased, but I think it's really detailed. It took about a year to write it. It has everything I think that's a necessity for fantasy. It does. It's got your healers, your clerics, your spellcasters. The lead mage, Kaladaz, is a necromancer, so she controls the undead. But each character, I strove to design their own unique personality. It's something, so whether you like fantasy or just action in general, I think you would love the book. And I think I'll just end with the fact of saying that I do have some flyers you can pick up on your way out. It's just like a slip of paper. My books are on sale, so if you're interested in supporting me, I definitely appreciate it, so they will be on sale as well. But the flyer just has three main things on it. It's got a Twitter account that I just made this morning because, I'm not too big on the social networking. But I want to have opportunities to speak to my fans for support because I wouldn't be where I am without folks like you, and I'm not going to get where I want to go without folks like yourself. Well, I want to be, I think Harry Potter from first printing to movie was like 5 years. I think Twilight made it in a similar time frame. So, I say I'm almost a year and a half into it, so I've got 3.5 years to go. Hopefully I can have a major motion picture. But with you supporting me, I hope to be what I refer to as transparent, meaning I've heard a lot of famous like celebrities and people that get so big that they actually have people write their own Facebook responses and stuff for them, that kind of thing. My promise or dedication to you all is that everybody here, you help support me, I will be there for you. Like I said, I opened a Twitter account this morning. I am on Facebook, and that's on that little flyer on my Facebook page. And the link from my Amazon, author page is on there as well. That'll have the links for both books for you if you purchase the ebook, for example. But I really appreciate everybody being here today to support me. And I guess I'll hand it back over to Brandy.
Thank y'all so much. Now, what I want to do is, I'm sure that throughout this, some of you may have had something that you're curious about. How did this happen, or why did this happen, or why